froze up and there's some more.
Oh,
All she could do is raise her head and her tail. She could,
Okay.
she crawled.
Oh.
Those were at the first vet's office after we took her over there.
Okay, yeah, she was looking.
And that's her with my big dog when we got her home.
Oh.
She's gained about 20 pounds.
She looks in much better. Is that her too?
Yeah.
Okay. She looks better in that picture than these, maybe just because of the angle.
Yeah.
But, okay.
And we even tried water therapy. We got horse trough.
She didn't.
Yeah, there she is.
Okay. Well, she looks much better now than she did. Well, what I can tell you from her exam is her signs are telling me there's something wrong with her cerebellum.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the back part of the brain that controls kind of balance, coordination, but it doesn't affect usually their mentation. So she's very alert. Yeah, seems very aware of what's going on around her. That part of her brain is not affected. But the way that when she bends her head down to sniff, or I heard when she eats, she kind of like pecks at it. Those are called intention tremors. That's very consistent with a cerebellar problem. The way that she's got pretty good strength. When we stand her up, she's got good strength. She can hold herself up. But when she's walking, she's very uncoordinated, kind of has a sort of spastic, exaggerated sort of steps.
Right, her back legs don't move as well as the front. She tries dragging them sometimes.
Okay. The way that she walks is very consistent with a cerebellar problem. And even though she's so off balance, when she's standing up and I turn her feet under, she puts them back very quickly, which is also another thing that we see with the cerebellar problem, that she can flip her feet. Because with other sort of brain problems, they don't know when their feet are turned under, they don't recognize that, and they don't flip them back. So everything is really pointing towards this is a problem in her cerebellum. What I can't tell you just from an exam though is, well, what's causing this problem? And I know we don't really know her history. We don't know how long this has been going on, if she's been this way, her whole life, or if this is something that developed at some point. And so things that I think are potentially likely are either some sort of a congenital problem, so not necessarily meaning that she was born this way, but there is a condition we can see in these guys in particular where they get a condition called cerebellar abiotrophy, where they're born with a normal cerebellum, but then over time some of the cells within the cerebellum basically start to die off. And it can start sometimes a year and a half of age. Sometimes they don't start developing these symptoms till they're 9 years old. So it's really variable when it can start. And it's somewhat variable in the progression, but it can be something that progresses over years. So it's usually considered a disease that does get worse over time. So what I don't know is, when you found her and she was in really bad shape and malnourished, that was probably causing a lot of her weakness, and so she's improved because now she's in much better condition than she was. But my concern is if she has cerebellar abiotrophy, that she will get worse over time. So that's one possibility. I think it's possible this could be head trauma. We could potentially see something like this if she had been hit by a car, or even potentially someone maliciously did something to her. I didn't see from your pictures or see now any external signs of injury, but it's still possible.
But I was telling her the calluses on her feet, she didn't have those. She's developed those the past 2 months from crawling. So, my thinking is she wasn't always that way.
She may not have been, or I don't know if it's someone was taking care of her and then someone abandoned her. And so if she, or, again, if, she wasn't allowed to do anything, I don't know. But as far as, something else, we don't know her exact age, but she seems young. The possibility of her having something like a brain tumor affecting her cerebellum is really unlikely. Same thing with something like an infection in her brain causing this is pretty unlikely because she's not gotten worse in the period that you've had her. Most infections get worse pretty quickly, versus the cerebellar abiotrophy, that can take years to kind of get worse. So that right now, unfortunately, is my top suspicion. As far as trying to get a definitive diagnosis of that can be very difficult. It kind of involves ruling out other things. So if we wanted to try to diagnose that with more certainty, you know, it would potentially involve doing something like an MRI and a spinal tap, looking at her brain, and making sure there aren't other malformations, making sure we don't see signs of inflammation in her brain. But if she has a cerebellar abiotrophy, we may not see anything abnormal at this stage, because it's usually not to really end stage that there's appreciable kind of shrinking of the cerebellum on MRI. So at this point, we could do an MRI and it could look normal. And so it would help to rule out some other things, but there's not a way while she's alive until very end stage to kind of get a diagnosis of cerebellar abiotrophy. We don't have, there's no blood test or DNA test that we have for that. A lot of it's just based on the symptoms. You know, a breed that we recognize gets that problem, and then seeing kind of the progression. So
what does it look like as it progresses?
it would involve more tremors of her head. So right now, like while she's sitting still like this, you know, she doesn't have severe tremors. When she goes to do something, you know, they're pretty pronounced, but more tremors, or even when she's sitting still, like she can't keep her head still, and just more problems with her gait. So even though, you know, she can't get up and walk on her own, when you have her up, you know, she's supporting herself, she's moving her legs, so it may get to a point where she's so uncoordinated, even with you holding her up, it's really difficult for her to try to move. And she crawls, you know, now, and she was, you know, like trying to crawl into your lap and pat on you, but it could get to where she can't even get herself up sternal to crawl. Most dogs with cerebellar abiotrophy are usually euthanized because of their disease, because they eventually get to a point where, you know, if they can't even sit sternal, and that's not a good quality of life. They don't usually die from it, because it would take a really long time. So most of them end up eventually euthanized, so they don't suffer. So it's kind of, I think it's a tough decision whether or not we do an MRI. I think there's a good chance that her MRI will be normal. I think it's unlikely that if we did an MRI, it would lead to a treatment.
So what would be your recommendation for her?
I mean, I think it's reasonable to continue to just watch her and continue to work with her as much as possible, trying to get her up and moving around. I mean, the best hope would be if this was trauma, because she could potentially improve further just with time and rehab. I don't think that she would ever be normal, because her signs are pretty pronounced. So even if this was head trauma, I don't think she's ever going to be normal, but she might improve further. The big thing would be she's not going to get worse if it's trauma.
Would she ever be able to get up and walk?
I don't know. I don't know. But if it's cerebellar abiotrophy, eventually she'll get worse. So it's not a painful condition, but it would, you know, it just affects their
It's not a good quality of life.
It's not.
Yeah. Okay.
And as far as you know, there aren't any types of mobility, artificial mobility that could help?
No, I mean, they do make, so I know she had a cart that you tried out.
Wheelchair.
Was it just for the back legs?
It was for the back, and she's wobbles so much she would just fall.
Right, and that's the hard part, is when they're really wobbly in the front and the back legs, it's hard to find something that would work for them. They do make carts for dogs that are weak in the front as well. She has enough movement, she might be able to kind of propel herself forward with something like that. I don't know.
I don't know. She doesn't put much effort into walking. I mean, she'll move them, but it's not like. Now, some days are better than others. I was telling her, I was sitting on the floor with her last night, and I was sitting against the couch, and she had crawled up in my lap and put both her feet on my shoulder, and then all of a sudden she goes over my shoulder and gets on the couch.
Okay.
So she has her good moments, and then some days I try to pick her up and she just falls. She just can't.
Okay. Yeah, she's got good muscle tone. She's got the strength. She doesn't have the coordination.
Would you do the MRI here?
Yes, if you decided to do it, that is available here. We're the only place in Middle Tennessee to do that. So we do.
What's a ballpark figure?
It's about $2,300 to do that.
Well, we've had a
You do get a
fundraiser for her.
discount.
We've got close to, what did I tell you, 3,000 in our fundraiser for her so far. So,
Okay.
I mean, we're able to do it if
Okay.
you think there's a chance that.
I think it's a low chance it's going to lead to a treatment. We may have some more information, but to actually find something
That could
we
be treated.
Right, I think is very, very low. So I don't know if it's, putting those funds towards that, versus if there's, something else you could use them for.
It's always tough when you're talking about a life.
Yeah, I know, and she's a super sweet
She's
dog.
a sweet dog.
The quality, though, is what
Yeah.
we as a rescue also look at.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
It's not the news we wanted, but thank you.
I know. I wish I could tell you something, different. I just don't think that's the case.